Hi everyone, I'm Chrissy Midwife and today's video is on my top 7 suggestions for a birth preferences list. Today I'm going to teach you how to write a birth preferences list that you can use as a communication tool between your care provider and yourself, whether that be a midwife or an obstetrician. We're going to cover such things as pain management plan, who's your support crew, what are your preferences for labour and birth, and so much more. But before we get started, I'd love you to give me a like and a share and hit the subscribe button down in the bottom of your corner of your screen and the little bell beside it. So firstly, let's do a little bit of housekeeping because truthfully, I kind of hate the term birth plan. Let's be honest, nothing in life goes 100% to plan. Nothing is 100% perfect. And the term birth plan is very strict and very rigid, and there's no wiggle room. And in labour and birth, we need wiggle room. So let's call it what it should be called, and that is a birth preferences list. Unfortunately, as midwives, we know that mums who have a very strict, very rigid birth plan that doesn't have any wiggle room in it, they are more than likely going to be disappointed with their labour and birth if it doesn't follow that specific plan that they had in mind. As a midwife, my suggestion is that your birth preferences list should be a one-page, single-sided document. Because as your midwife, when you come into the birth suite, I want to be able to give you 100% of my focus and energy at all of the times. And when you potentially come in with a 7 to 8 page document that is very strict and very detailed, I'm not going to be able to have the time to go through that 7 or 8 pages properly and give you the 100% of focus that you need. So if you come in with a beautiful, clear, one-page, single-sided document, I'm going to be able to go through it and go, yes, great, I know what your pain plan is, I know what your labour and birth preferences are, and I'm going to go, yes, 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 and we're all on the same page. And then I'm going to be able to give you all of my focus and energy, 100% of your labour and birth. So number 1 is pain management. What are your thoughts? Do you want a natural birth? Would you like an epidural? Would you like to be offered pain relief by your midwife, or would you like them to not offer anything until you ask for it? If you're opting to have an epidural, it's great for your care provider to know this in advance. This way we can talk to you about when you might want it, we can talk through how the process happens, and we can anticipate the fact that we may need to call an anaesthetist in because sometimes the hospitals don't have them on site all the time. If you're coming in and saying, nope, no pain relief at all, I'm having a natural birth, great. As your care provider, as your midwife, we can set up an environment that will help you manage your contractions during your labour. If you're hoping to have a natural birth, will you use water? Will you use heat? Will you use massage? Will you use acupressure to help you manage your contractions? Now, let's be honest, there are most women come into birth suite and go, I have no idea how I'm going to manage my pain, and that is completely fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with seeing how the day unfolds and allowing yourself that wiggle room, because that is the key to your labour and birth. Okay, so number 1, we covered pain relief, natural acupressure or medicalized. So we've got nitrous oxide, morphine, epidurals. That's your pain relief preferences. Number 2, your support crew. Now let's be honest, when you come in labour and birth, I'm going to know your name because you're my priority. But to better support you, I need to know who your people are, who your person is. So it's really great on your preferences list to put down who's your support crew. Put down the name of your partner, your mum, your sister, your auntie. If you have a doula, write their name down. A birth photographer, their name as well. I can better support you by knowing who's in the room with you and their relationship to you. And let's be honest, if you're coming in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m., I'm going to remember your name, but there's a pretty high chance that I'm not going to remember their name in the middle of the night, and I can have a cheeky little look at your preferences list and jog my memory on who they are. So to my next point, what is your labor game plan? Do you want to be able to move around the room freely? Do you want to be able to get in and out of the bath? Do you want the lights on, some music playing, or some essential oils? Would you prefer your midwife to make some position suggestions, or would you prefer them to wait quietly in the background until you ask for some assistance? Side note tip, ask your midwife for suggestions, because we have some fantastic tips and tricks in our tool belt that will help you during your established active labor. That way you can get your baby into an optimal birthing position and expedite labor and delivery. No, I hate the word delivery. And expedite your labor and birth. If possible, would you like to see your baby being born via a mirror? And if so, we'll need to have that ready. Would you like to reach down and catch your baby as it's being born? Those are the kind of things that we'd like to know in your preferences list. So number 4 is preferences for medical intervention. Now, medical intervention can be the simple act of how would you like your baby's heart rate to be monitored during labor? Would you like intermittent auscultation, which is listening to baby's heart rate with a little Doppler? Or would it be continuous monitoring? That is done by a cardiotopograph. I said that right. So do you have a preference for how you would like your baby's health to be monitored during labor? It's also a really good idea to check with the hospital that you're birthing at and what their policies are around monitoring baby's well-being during labor and birth. Also, interventions can be things like an artificial rupture of membranes, which is basically your midwife or your doctor breaking your waters. Sometimes this is required to assist your labor. And if they are going to do that, how do you feel about that? What are your preferences are on that? I do have another entire video on medical interventions. So if you're unsure about what kind of medical interventions can happen in labor and birth, pop over to that other video and have a little look. Medical interventions leads me on to my next point, which is Caesarean sections. As much as we would love you to have a normal, natural vaginal birth, sometimes, unfortunately, labor and birth can end up in a Caesarean section. And if this is the case, what are your preferences around a Caesarean section? As much as you probably don't want this to occur, it is a really good idea when you're preparing for labor and birth to have a little think about, okay, what if it doesn't take the path that I want it to and we do end up in a C-section? Then what would I like to have to make that experience a more pleasant one? Is your partner able to go with you into theatre? And that's a really good thing to check with your obstetrician or your midwife or your care provider. If the unfortunate occurrence happens that your labor and birth turns into a C-section, is your partner able to go with you? Are you able to take photos of your baby being born? Are you able to have some music in the theatre to make it a more joyous experience? Can your partner and you be the ones to announce the sex of the baby? Those are the kind of things that you could put on your preferences list if your birth turns into a Caesarean section. Is it possible to do skin to skin in theatre? That's another preference you might write down. And if it is not possible because of hospital policy, could your partner then do skin to skin in theatre? Now we're moving on to our post-baby preferences. What do you want to do with your placenta? And your cord blood. Your placenta is this fantastic organ that over the last 9 months has helped keep your baby alive. What are you going to do with it? Some women are like, great, let me have a look at it. I want to see what it looks like. I want to see what it's done, where my baby has lived, and then they're very happy to have it disposed of. Some women would love to keep their placenta. Side note, if you plant it underneath a fruit tree, it grows the most amazing fruit because that sucker is chock full of nutrients. Did you know that your cord blood from your umbilical cord can also be banked? Some hospitals nowadays have a cord blood donation bank, which is used for medical treatment and medical research. There are also private companies where you can pay to have your cord blood and stem cells saved and banked for future medical use for you or your family. Okay, so what are your preferences in relation to your baby? Would you like to do immediate skin to skin, which we know has millions of benefits for both your baby, you, and your breast milk supply? So let's start with feeding preferences. Are you going to breastfeed? Are you going to formula feed? Are you going to do a combination of both? I will say, as a midwife, if you are planning to breastfeed, it is a really good idea to exclusively breastfeed from day dot, from the beginning and the entire time that you're in the hospital. The more we stimulate the breast in the early days of your new baby's life, the quicker your milk will come in and the more abundant that it will come in. But we can talk about all of that breastfeeding stuff in another video. Finally, with your baby, would you like to delay their first bath? Will you be consenting for them to have the vitamin K vaccination, the hepatitis B vaccination, the newborn screening test, or the healthy hearing test? All of these topics are things that you should be thinking about in relation to your preferences on your baby and those first few days in the hospital. So to recap, here are my 7 tips for your birth preferences list. Pain management plan, who's your support crew, your labour and birth game plan, your thoughts on medical intervention, what happens if you end up in a caesarean section, what are you going to do with your placenta, and your preferences for your newborn baby. If you need an example of a birth preferences list and what to write on it, I've linked one below in the description.